Blood Drive, a novel by Tim Sunderland. Prologue 1. Shortly after Myrna died, the dreams came back, and Harsh returned to his routine of wearing 2 t-shirts when he slept. It was easier to change wet t-shirts than wet bed sheets. The t-shirt had to be a thick one, though, in order to absorb the perspiration, or else both t-shirt and bed sheets would be soaked. But there was nothing he could do about the rest of the night. The dreams made further sleep impossible. For several years after the shooting, even when he was living in Guatemala, the dreams were sharp and focused. Over time, they diminished. Then they became just bits and pieces of the event, then stopping altogether. After Myrna's death, though, they came back with all the intensity of the original ones. He had hoped that when he started driving Lyft, that the added stimulation of something else to think about might mitigate the dreams. No such luck. If it was the full dream, it started with Harsh driving through the industrial backstreets of North Hollywood, just as in the actual event. Sometimes he found the car right away. In other dreams, the drive took an inordinate amount of time, as if Harsh were walking through the Louvre on his way to see the Mona Lisa. He wasn't interested in the other works, just the piece in the end of the next hall. Other versions of the dream began with Harsh looking at the car through the back and forth of the patrol car windshield wipers. Harsh had not been happy that night, but not because of the rain. The watch commander on his team was off, recovering from the extraction of an impacted wisdom tooth. His replacement was Sergeant Ray Zelenos. Harsh and Zelenos had decided a few years earlier, after numerous run-ins, to agree on their mutual dislike of each other. Harsh's role as corporal on the team, however, meant that he had to work with Zelenos. But rain ensured a quiet time on the weekend graveyard shift. After the bars closed and the last of the drunk drivers booked, patrolmen on the shift busied themselves with cruising the streets and alleys of the suburban town in the western San Fernando Valley, carved out of the larger city of Los Angeles. There would be little action, save for the occasional accident on the slick roads. Harsh was restless. A day earlier, the chief and the administration captain had met with him in the conference room in the detective bureau. Harsh had passed both the sergeant's exam and the detective exam. They gave him his choice of assignments. "Can I give you my answer by the end of the week?" said Harsh. He knew his choice would be the detective bureau, but he wanted to be deliberate. "Let us know by Friday," said the chief. Now Harsh was mulling over his decision and the knowledge that he would be leaving patrol. As a corporal, Harsh didn't have a beat. He was free to roam the city. He preferred cruising through the industrial areas. They were mostly deserted, but they were a favorite target for burglars. He was coming out of a slow curve with his lights off, a favorite tactic of his, when he caught sight of darkened taillights in his rearview mirror. He slowed, throwing off the red illumination from his brake lights, and yanked a quick U-turn. There was a car in the parking lot. It looked to be at least 10 years old. The windows were fogged, telling Harsh there was someone inside, their expelled breath forming condensation on the glass. The rear passenger door was open, something he hadn't seen in the rearview mirror. He never noticed the car there before. Harsh keyed the mic to the radio and gave his call sign and location. "I'll be out checking a suspicious vehicle. Roll a back." Harsh hit all the lights on the car at once. Spotlights, headlights, and the red and blue rotators. A boy no older than 18, clad only in boxer shorts, emerged from the open door. Even in the rain, it looked as if he was crying. He had a grown-out buzz cut, matted down by the moisture. Several tattoos adorned his arms and thin chest. Harsh could not be sure in the rain and at the distance he was at, but the tattoo on the webbing of the boy's right hand looked like a shamrock, a symbol of the Peckerwoods, a white supremacist group. The youth was facing the car, looking into the back seat through the open door. His left hand was out of sight, and it bothered Harsh. Harsh put the gear in park as he exited the patrol car, at the same time pulling out his gun and holding it down against his leg. The rain was coming down harder. The boy was blinded by the spotlight. Harsh stepped away from the light and walked forward a few steps. Outside of the light's beam, he was not backlit, which would have made him a perfect target. "Let me see both hands," Harsh said loud enough to be heard over the noise of the rain. The boy said something in return, but Harsh didn't understand it. "Your hands," Harsh shouted this time and raised his pistol. The boy spoke again, and this time Harsh heard the words. "She's gone. The girl's not here." Still no left hand. Both doors in the passenger side of the car opened at the same time. These two were older than the first one, more men than boys, and they got out quickly. On instinct, Harsh swung his pistol to confront the new members of the conversation. They were agitated, upset at whatever Harsh had interrupted. They had similar buzz cuts like the first boy, but far more tattoos on their muscular arms and chests. The one that came out of the back seat moved away from the car. He was naked and he had a semi-erection. Again, Harsh could not see his hands. Harsh lined his pistol sights on the naked man's chest. 6 months earlier, the department had changed to Smith & Wesson Model 1076 10mm pistols. Harsh had put in extra time at the range getting used to it. "Let me see both hands," Harsh shouted again. Instead, the naked man took another step back and raised his right arm. He was quick, but Harsh had the advantage. He saw the small blue steel automatic in the man's hand. He squeezed the trigger on his own gun twice, both times his view momentarily obscured by the tongue of flame that licked from the barrel of his gun. The impact threw the man off his feet, landing on his back on the loose gravel of the parking lot. Harsh knew both rounds had struck. He tracked over to the other man on the passenger side of the car. He was lunging back into the front seat. Again, Harsh squeezed the trigger twice. He wasn't sure where the shots went, but he heard a grunt. He'd struck something. There was another gunshot, this time not from Harsh's gun. Harsh swung his gun around to the original boy. There was a revolver in his raised and shaking hand. From inside the car, the second man shouted, "Shoot him, Bryce! Shoot him!" "Drop it." This time, Harsh's voice was lower, trying to calm the boy. The boy raised the gun again so that Harsh was looking down the barrel. Harsh took up the slack in his trigger, but then read the look in the boy's eyes. "I give up," it said. It was too late. Harsh was already squeezing the trigger, once and then again. The rain fell heavier. Harsh's ears were ringing from the gunshots. His heart pounded and he tasted metal. He knew he had 4 rounds left in the clip, but training took over. He ejected the magazine, letting it fall to the ground, and loaded a full one. He had a dilemma and only seconds to act. Multiple suspects were down, and he wasn't sure who could still fire a gun. The boy was wheezing. Lung shot, thought Harsh. He was in bad shape. Harsh took a gamble and left him for the other 2. The first was on his back, his arms spread wide. He was clearly dead, his eyes open and fixed, blood not even oozing from the holes in the center of his chest. The heart wasn't pumping. Harsh saw all this in a glance and turned his attention to the wounded man who posed the greatest threat. The man had gotten back out of the car, but he was sitting on the ground and having a difficult time moving. There was a lot of blood. Harsh could see that he had shot him in his left bicep. The bullet must have struck bone. His arm was not working right. There was also another wound, more of a furrow on the side of his chest, and this one bled much more. Harsh judged it was not serious because the man's breathing was unhindered. Despite his screams of pain and protest, Harsh handcuffed his uninjured arm to the outside door handle of the car. He took a look inside. A .45 caliber automatic pistol was lying on the floorboard of the passenger seat. Harsh reached in and picked it up, made sure the gun was not cocked, and slid it into his belt in the small of his back. Harsh could still hear the wheezing from the boy on the other side of the car. Perceiving that he wasn't in danger from him, he went back to the dead man. Like a lot of police officers, Harsh carried 2 sets of cuffs. He rolled him over and cuffed him, this time picking up the gun that was inches from where the outstretched hand had been. "Fuck you, you heartless bastard," screamed the man cuffed to the door handle. "How many of you are here?" Harsh asked. "Is one of your buddies out there?" "Fuck you," the man was gritting his teeth in pain. Harsh did not reply. Satisfied that the two were secure, the boy was next. Harsh was right. Both rounds hit the lungs. One of the bullets must have hit an artery, too. There was a lot of bubbling blood. Harsh went down to one knee and picked up the revolver. The boy looked at Harsh, blinking the rain out of his eyes. With his left hand, he grabbed Harsh's arm. He wheezed lightly three more times, then his eyes went fixed. Even at death, he had the same look Harsh saw when he pulled the trigger. I give up. Harsh stood and took another look inside the car. There were various items of clothing in the front and back seats, some fast food wrappers, about a dozen empty beer cans, and other items. Harsh's eyes fixed on a pair of panties and a bra. He remembered the boy's words. She's gone. The girl's not here. There's a girl around here, thought Harsh. Hey, asshole, I need a doctor, said the wounded man. Shut up, said Harsh. Harsh was still concerned that at least one more accomplice was hiding nearby. He looked in the car again and saw 3 soft drink cups. 3 bad guys, 3 drinks. If there was a fourth one, he probably didn't take his drink with him. Harsh decided that he had everyone. Harsh took the guns that he had collected, one tucked into his belt and the other in each pocket of his jacket, and put them on the floorboard in the back of his cruiser. Then he unclipped the handheld radio on his belt. He'd always wondered how he would handle a moment like this. Again, he gave his call numbers and his location. Officer needs assistance. I have 3 suspects shot and down. Roll assisting units code 3. I also need an ambulance. The wounded man continued to moan. Harsh knew they could hear it over the radio. Also, I'm not sure if there's another suspect that left the scene. He might be out there among the buildings. He left the transmit button go, allowing the dispatcher to repeat his request to the other units. It wasn't needed, though. All 6 beat officers were no doubt roaring to his location, as well as every other cop from every other jurisdiction for at least 10 miles. Harsh looked down at the dead boy and a wave of revulsion hit him. He bent over and vomited his dinner. When he was done, Harsh heard the voice of Sergeant Ray Zelenos on the radio. Judging by the impatient tone, Zelenos had been calling for a while. What's the condition of the suspects? There were private citizens throughout the city with police scanners. Harsh chose his words with care. 2 of them are not good. I think I got a rape victim hiding. Can we get the sheriff's helicopter out here to light up the area? I'll be there in 60 seconds, Zelenos said. Nothing about the copter. Harsh decided this was not a time to worry about second-guessing the ranking officer. He keyed the mic again. I think I have all the suspects, but I'm not sure. We need a helicopter. Harsh could hear the catch in the voice of Zelenos. Dispatch requests the sheriff's helicopter. Harsh listened to the radio chatter from responding units while he scanned the area. Preserving the scene was important, so he resisted going farther away. He also left all the lights on from the police car. It would make it easier to find him for both the patrol units and the helicopter. True to his word, it took Zelenos only a minute to get to the scene. He parked on the street, blocking most of the entrance to the parking lot. I got 2 dead. You put them down, said Zelenos. Yeah. Harsh walked Zelenos through the scene. He was surprised at the shakiness of his own voice. Where's the girl, said Zelenos. Was there a girl? I'm guessing that when I drove past, they saw my brake lights and pushed her out of the car and told her to run. The naked DOA had a semi-erection. Then there are the bra and panties in the car. I didn't want to leave the scene to go look for her. You picked up the guns? I still have a live suspect, Ray. I handled him by the barrel. Harsh shook his head in disapproval. Excuse me. Zelenos shook his head in disapproval. What do you think, Sergeant? You think I had 3 throwaway guns on me? I followed procedures, secure the weapons. It just looks bad, sloppy. What took you so long answering the radio when I called? I was over there vomiting my dinner. Harsh felt the irritation. Excuse me, but I understand it's a standard reaction after killing 2 people. The sergeant gave Zelenos a sideways look and then keyed his mic. He identified himself to the dispatcher. Keep the ambulance coming. Also call the coroner's office and tell them we need a team. Tell them we have 2 suspects that we have expired. Get a unit to drop by the station before coming out here and get a crime scene preservation kit, including 3 shelters and all the lights and stands we have. Zelenos took his thumb off the mic. The dispatcher did not respond right away, so he started in again. Call the chief and the patrol captain. Also call the lieutenant of detectives and tell them what we have. Advise the sheriff's department and neighboring agencies. We might have a victim out there. As Harsh was listening to Zelenos, he heard another patrol car arrive. A car door slammed and he saw a silhouette moving in the dark, and he knew it was Dave Williams, a veteran cop who had been one of the Harsh's training officers 5 years earlier. Williams was a very low-key guy. Even when he was being a badass with a suspect, it was difficult to take him seriously. What the fuck happened, he asked when he got within earshot of Harsh, keeping his voice low. Harsh's voice was still shaky, but now he found himself fighting back tears. I think I walked into a rape in progress, but the victim ran. These 3 had guns. I put down 2 of them. The last one will survive. I hit him in the upper arm. Yeah, well, your actions were at this scene were no doubt the result of a good training officer. Williams was quick to bring humor to a situation. The rain had stopped. Harsh could hear other vehicles arriving. There was also a sheriff's unit and 2 cars from LAPD. Among them was also the sound of a heavier vehicle, an EMT unit. The paramedics got out and started tending to the wounded man. Williams directed them, doing his best to make sure the crime scene was protected. Then everyone's attention was distracted by the dispatcher's voice. I have airport police on the phone. She was referring to nearby Hollywood Burbank Airport. There is a naked girl running through the parking lots screaming for help. Zelenos looked at Harsh. Harsh thought he could see the disappointment on the sergeant's face. Send an officer, Zelenos said into his walkie-talkie. I'll be heading over in a few. Zelenos looked at Harsh. You're relieved of duty. Go sit in your unit. Williams will take over. Also surrender your weapon, Harsh. We'll have to test it. Harsh knew this was SOP, standard operating procedure. He couldn't help thinking, however, that Zelenos was relishing every moment of this. He pulled the weapon from the holster. Don't even clear it, said Zelenos, knowing that Harsh would automatically unload it before giving it to the other officer. We want every detail so we can make sure your story stands up. Harsh handed over the gun. We'll need your backup weapon, too. Harsh reached into his jacket and unsnapped his .45 automatic. He handed it to Zelenos, not bothering to unload it. After Zelenos left, Williams came over to Harsh in the car. Zelenos didn't need to be an asshole. His voice was low, especially now that we have a victim. Any idiot can see this shooting is justified. He's just being a dick because he can. More officers arrived. The rain started again, then stopped. Harsh heard the familiar sound of the sheriff's helicopter. Soon the spotlight was crisscrossing the buildings. Williams appeared next to him again. He put both hands on the window and leaned down so he was eye to eye with Harsh. I'm a union rep. Between you and me, step by step, what happened? Harsh related the story that he told Zelenos, but this time added the detail at the end when he recognized the look of surrender in the boy's eyes. By the time Harsh got to the end of the story, he was crying. I couldn't stop, Dave. It all happened in a split second. I was pulling the trigger when I saw it. Williams reached through the window and squeezed Harsh's shoulder. Look at me. He repeated the words, look at me. Harsh made eye contact. This is a good shooting, but you don't need to add that part, the look in the kid's eyes. Zelenos has a hard-on for you and he'll run with that. That part never happened. The 12 hours after that were a blur for Harsh. The 12 hours after that were a blur for Harsh. Williams asked the paramedics tending the shoulder shot one to go back to their truck. When they were out of earshot, Williams leaned over to the survivor and suggested that he might probe the wounds with a ballpoint pen. The bleeding man acquiesced and confessed that he and his dead partner were initiating the younger one into their group, and a gang rape was part of it. A few minutes later, the brass started to arrive. The chief of police took one look and called the sheriff's department commander and asked him to handle the investigation to ensure impartiality. The naked girl running through the airport turned out to be the victim. She was 14 years old and had been kidnapped from El Monte. Later, they told Harsh that the girl confirmed as much of the story as she could, affirming that she had heard a burst of gunfire as she was running down the street away from the scene. A sheriff's deputy drove Harsh back to the station, where he left him in an interrogation room. He had stopped crying, but if he took a deep breath, something inside him would shudder, racking his body. He retold the story twice, once to the lieutenant of detectives and the patrol captain, and then again to a sheriff's detective and one of their brass. By the time everyone was done asking questions, it was past noon, but Harsh was anything but tired. Every nerve in his body was on fire. The patrol captain came into the interrogation room. His voice was little more than a whisper. He prefaced it as being unofficial, but he told Harsh that it looked as if the shooting would be ruled as justified. Both of the older gang members had lengthy arrest records, he said. I have no doubt that they would have killed you. The sheriff's department considered them bad hombres, white supremacists and suspects in several racially motivated attacks. He saved what Harsh considered the worst for last. The boy, the one that grabbed his hand, was 17. He would have been 18 next week. Justified or not, Harsh knew his career as a police officer was over, at least in his own mind. The last thing he wanted to see was a gun. He knew he could never pull the trigger again. A week later, and badly hungover, he turned in his resignation. I'm going to stop here for a minute.